Now, I was just always on something. I just basically used any woman that was in my path. At heart, I was a hedonist. I am absolutely shattered to know that my hero was at his root and his core, he was a liar. It just ripped my heart out. I didn't step foot into another church for 19 years. I kept getting this terrible depression, and I found that it would go away when I started drinking. Literally for 19 years, I stayed intoxicated or inebriated. I would go to bed drunk. I would wake up still drunk. During the day, I'd be popping Vicodin and pills, and I'd carry a little bullet of cocaine so I could, get my ups and my downs. So I kept having car accident after car accident. I couldn't hear anything. I thought maybe I was dead. 2,000 stitches in my body. And we had people that were offering us $25 million. A multimillionaire was not enough. I wanted to be a billionaire. I wanted it all. I guess I wasn't willing to change. Doc goes, "Greg, we need to talk. You're terminal." I'm a dead man. Absolutely, without a doubt, I know I'm dying. It was a typical American household. Our family went to church. We did all supposedly the right things. My father was one of the deacons in our church, a little Southern Baptist church in Greenville, South Carolina, like, the belt buckle of the Bible Belt kind of thing. It was a Christmas day, and I'm sitting in the Christmas tree. My uncle sexually molested me at the Christmas tree. And I didn't understand. I was 6 years old, and I think I just kind of buried it. Then I was really confused. I was awakened sexually at 6 years of age, and then I understood how that was wrong. And then I thought, I felt so guilty, like I had done something wrong. And so when I was 7 or 8, I started playing doctor with girls. And so it kept going on, and it got worse and worse. I ended up getting a girl pregnant at a very young age. I remember one night, just really crystal clear, when I was 12 years old, that it was right after the preacher had spoken, and he shared about Jesus, and then they started playing that music, like at the end of Billy Graham, that "Just As I Am," and they played it like 50 chorus lines. I'm going, dude, is this ever gonna end? I'm ready to get out of here. And I was white-knuckling the pews like this. I'm like, I'm not going down there. I can outlast this song. I really can. And the next thing I know, it's just like, am I really doing this? Am I really going to give my life to Jesus? And I walked down there, and my life changed from that time on. And it seemed like the stuff that happened when I was 6 just kind of disappeared. I didn't think about it anymore. My father, who was head of the deacons, he got caught cheating on my mother with the secretary of his company. And then it came out. My mom found out about it, and then the church found out about it. And what ensued was what they called church discipline, where they basically remove him from leadership in the church. And what I sensed in that whole thing was there wasn't any love involved in it. It just seemed harsh. And I kept hearing all these whispers and gossip in a little 70-person Southern Baptist church, and I'm like, I can't believe this. I mean, I'm already angry with my father. I mean, when I hear the news about Dad, I am absolutely shattered. I mean, I am devastated to know that my hero was at his root and his core, he was a liar. And it felt like that's exactly what all the church was, a bunch of lying hypocrites. And I left that church that day when I was 14, and I didn't step foot into another church for 19 years. I kept getting this terrible depression, and I found that it would go away when I started drinking. And I started drinking just light beer stuff, and then it started getting heavier and heavier. And then I discovered marijuana when I was 15, and then I think it just kept snowballing. I just felt like I wanted to kill myself the minute I sobered up. Literally for 19 years, I stayed intoxicated or inebriated in some way, shape, form, or fashion. And I know that sounds like there's no way somebody could stay that messed up for 19 years. I meet whole sets of new friends and make whole new sets of friends, and so they never know that I'm either drunk or I'm stoned or on some type of pill. They just think that's who Greg is. Greg is just a happy-go-lucky guy. He doesn't really care about anything. He's just going about his life, and he wants to make a bunch of money and just hang out on a beach somewhere and smoke dope and look at girls. That's who Greg is. And so I had multiple girlfriends in this period of time that I took their virginity on and on like that. I just basically used any woman that was in my path. I manipulated. 19 years was nothing but a wake. A wake. A train wreck in people's lives that I devastated. I had 13 car accidents in the period of like 5 or 6 years, and I totaled all 13 cars. 2,000 stitches in my body. I've broken like every bone in my body except my hard head, and I still couldn't get it. I still couldn't learn. I just kept, I was like, dude, cool. I ended up in the hospital. Hey, look, morphine, sweet, this rocks, man. And then I get out, I get more pills, Vicodin, yeah, this is good. I got in my car and I'm doing 110 miles an hour down a road with no lights on. And for some reason I thought it would be cool to race. Yeah, I was drunk, I was on drugs and everything else. And all of a sudden it's getting ready to go around the bend, and I just keep going off straight. And then I hit tree after tree after tree, and finally I hit an oak tree. I was just messed up. I was pinned, I was bleeding all here. They actually had to push back in my intestines. I had internal bleeding. I almost died. I bruised my heart. I smashed my leg. Take a look at this. This is just horrible. Look at this. I smashed my leg when I hit the tree. It actually just crushed it like this. I have one bone in my leg by the time they put it together. And I'm getting just tons of free drugs. My girlfriend at the time was going and buying me, big, huge half gallons of Crown Royal. And so I'm drinking and doing drugs. And so even though the pain was bad, it wasn't like unbearable because, I was totally medicated. At that time I had an old MG that I had redone, a nice convertible, and I really dug it. I left this bar called the Wicked Witch in South Carolina. I'm like, dude, that's like suitable. Because that's what you felt like when you left that place. I had forgotten my keys, and so I'd hot-wired my car, and the little wire had fallen off when I was driving down the road. And so I'm looking on the ground because my car starts cutting off and decelerating, and I look down for a second, and the next thing I know, I see headlights right in front of me, and I swerve onto the oncoming lane, and I hit this BMW head on. I can actually remember that event because I was looking around, and there were like people on the side of the street just looking and staring. I couldn't hear anything. I thought maybe I was dead or something. It was just whispers of, and they were moving like in slow motion, pointing at me. And I just felt blood oozing down from my head and everywhere else. And the next thing I know, I woke up in the hospital. And I found out what happened. I had hit actually a Nigerian soccer player, he's a professional soccer player. I hit him head on in his BMW, and I ruined his life. He had to quit playing soccer for the rest of his life. His name was Christian, and Christian happened to be a Christian. And I know that it had to take everything in his heart to wheel into my room and to see how I was. I was the one that ruined his career, and yet he wasn't angry with me. He wasn't mad at me. Christian was Jesus in the flesh that day, and he forgave me that day. He forgave me. And you would think after an experience like that it would change something in my life. But it didn't. I got better. I got out of the hospital, and I forgot about Christian. I still didn't get it. I still just ignored it. I needed to forgive my dad. I needed to forgive the church. I needed to go back, and deal with that stuff in my life. But I wasn't ready to yet. At heart, I was a hedonist. But yet I was a smart enough hedonist to know I needed to make a lot of money to support my habits. The only way to really make your money was to own your own company. So I started working with this company thinking, well, here's something I can do. And I jumped into computers, and this was right when the PC was getting big and Windows was coming out. And dude, this is like dating me, I'm old. So this is ancient stuff. But I was working with my dad, and I said, you got to go PC, this big iron stuff. This is dinosaur stuff, man. This is yesterday. Let me come and let me reinvent your company. The only way we could connect was business. There was no love, there was no emotion behind it, because I think deep down inside I was always striving to please him and to have him be proud of me. I was working with Candy, actually, who was kind of my assistant in sales, and she helped and did a lot of stuff at the company. And Candy ends up becoming my wife, and she's still my wife today. Through that period of time, we ended up falling in love. And so Candy and I ended up starting a business, and actually we started a few businesses, and we made lots of money and lost lots of money. And each time that we would make it, we thought things were great. We would just spend it all on drugs and alcohol. We ended up spending a settlement that she got for $60,000, and I think we spent all of that on drugs and alcohol. And at some point in time, I would just black out. And whenever I blacked out, and I'm ashamed to admit this, but when I blacked out, I would beat my wife. I don't remember ever physically hitting her, but I saw the after effects the next day. And I tell you, it just ripped my heart out. But I wouldn't stop drinking. I wouldn't stop doing drugs. I couldn't, because if I did, I would have to face all of that in the past. I wasn't willing to change. And so the pain continued on, and it got worse. We ended up moving from South Carolina to Southern California. Candy's family was there. The only thing I didn't like necessarily was her brother was a Christian, and I didn't have any real friends that were Christians because, they're lying hypocrites. Can't trust them. Around 1995, Candy and Corey, who was my brother-in-law now, we decided to start a new company. It's a .com company, and this was right when the internet was growing big, and we were like one of the first 10,000 websites on the internet, and now 10,000 are being created like every day. And we start getting attention, and people start talking to us, and then we get some seed capital that comes in, and so all of a sudden we're making great salaries. We had people that were offering us, it started with $10 million for our company, and I think the largest offer we got that we turned down was $25 million. And at that time there was only 3 of us that had stock. You're talking a lot of money, and Candy and I basically had controlling ownership of this company, but I wanted it all. A millionaire, a multimillionaire was not enough. I wanted to be a billionaire. I wanted it all. And we're caught up in that world of power. And then the next thing I know, it's starting to crumble again, because I'm still doing drugs. I'm still drinking every night. I would go to bed drunk. I would wake up still drunk. I would get stoned at night. In between, during the day, I'd be popping Vicodin and pills and Valium and everything else to get through the day. And then I started doing cocaine. And I carry a little bullet of cocaine so I could, get my ups and my downs, and it totally changed me and who I was. And I was still abusing Candy. And she was, I think, at this point in time, I'm not sure she had a lot of love for me left, as much as she was looking for the bailout too. Well, as soon as the company goes, and boom, we could split and be done. Well, through this period of time, we also started to have a lot of problems, Corey and I, fighting for the reins of the company. And so I'm becoming, in my manipulative ways, I decided to set him up. I got Candy to actually go in there and fire her own brother and take away his stock. And his stock would have been worth, I don't know, $8 million if we just sold it for $25 million, and we stole it from him. Just like that. It was right after that I go into the hospital for what's called a pancreatic attack. Through years of drug and alcohol abuse, I developed acute pancreatitis. And every once in a while I'd go in the hospital with an attack. An attack was really painful. What would happen during an attack is right after a big, huge binge night or something like that, I would go and eat the next day, and the pancreas would be swollen so much that the tubes were swollen shut. And so the enzymes would actually be activated on the inside of the pancreas. I mean, it would eat you from the inside out. I mean, it's incredibly painful. You go in the hospital for like 2 or 3 weeks. They pump you on tons of morphine, which at that point in time I thought, dude, that's kind of break even. But I had a lot of these attacks, and they started escalating in intensity and frequency. Doc goes, Greg, we need to talk. You've gotten to the place there's just nothing else we can do for you. And I said, what do you mean, nothing you can do for me? And he just looks at me and he goes, well, you're terminal. What do you mean I'm gonna die? And I said, well, how long? 3, 4, at the most 5 years? 3 or 4 or 5, you're saying I'm gonna die in 3 or 4 or 5 years? And you can't even tell me when, and you can't do anything about it. And I felt this rage kind of well up in me. I started ripping out the IVs and everything else, and I said, well, what do I need you, Doc? And I got mad, and I called a taxi cab, and I went to my drug dealer in Newport Beach, and I bought $2,000 worth of cocaine. And I did all of it in about 35 days. I mean, I'm just trying to do anything just to numb the pain. And I get so paranoid with what's going on. I think every black car in the world is a government agent chasing me, trying to steal my company. I'm just like freaking out. But finally, I came to the end of myself. And I was so wrapped up in the drugs and the confusion and everything else that I finally just fell on my knees. And I cried out to God. But I heard, call Corey. I didn't have any other Christian friends because I didn't hang out with a bunch of lying hypocrites. That was me. Here's what was running through my head. If I call Corey, I'm just going to get an earful of how I just stole everything from him, and what are you calling me for, and everything else. And I decided to pick up the phone, and I called him, and I called him, and I said, Corey, I'm dying. And I'm addicted to cocaine and a bunch of other drugs. And I need your help. All he said was, I'll be right there. And he came and he just hugged me. And I just broke in his arms. I just cried and I wept and asked his forgiveness and told him how sorry I was. And he took me to a church. It just happened to be that night that a class was going on. And I don't know if you know what a 12-step study is, but it's kind of like that, except it's Christ-centered. And so it came my turn to share. And I started confessing sins as far back as I could. You know, I said, I did this wrong. You know, I judged the church. I judged my dad. You know, and I started confessing these things. And I couldn't stop. It took like, you know, an hour to confess 19 years worth of sin. I felt so light. I felt so, I don't know, so clean, spiritually healed of these things. I couldn't explain it. And so I rededicated my life to Christ before those men that day. I had perfect peace in my heart for the first time in 19 years. And I went home and I flushed every single drug I had down the commode. I think I stuffed it up twice. There was a lot of drugs to flush. I read the Bible 3 times straight through from cover to cover during this 1.5 year period. And at this time, I'm in such incredible pain from the chronic pancreatitis as it escalates and got worse and worse. After a while, I was forced to quit eating. I was being fed intravenously every night as I slept. I was on 300 milligrams of morphine. And through that period of time, God started cleaning up my life. I mean, even though I had quit drinking, I still wanted alcohol. But God took it away. I can't explain it, but all of a sudden, I couldn't even stand to see it or be around it. And then, you know, this laptop, I got this laptop. Back in 1999, this was a $10,000 laptop. I had 1 gigabyte of pornography on this laptop. And I can't explain that either, but all of a sudden I just felt like I gotta delete all of this stuff. And I did. I sat there and I deleted every single image on it. This was my portal to rebellion. It was my secret life that only I knew about. It was also the way I made my drug deals and my drug connections. I'd send out emails in code and the other guy would get it and they would unencrypt it. I think it was my mechanism for escape. Because I could open that up, jump in that world, and in that world, I was completely in control of everything. It all bowed down to me. I could make what I wanted when I wanted. I could score what I wanted when I wanted to score it. And now it's used for God. It's now not all about me. Now it's all about God in the laptop. So as I go through this 1.5 year period, and I'm seeking God, and I'm praying, and I'm reading the Bible, I'm a dead man. I'm praying this whole prayer because I absolutely, without a doubt, I know I'm dying. And I left that company, and I felt like I couldn't take any money from it. 6 years worth of work in that company. I didn't take a cent. But I knew I had to make that decision that day. And then I went to bed. And I woke up the next morning, and I didn't have any pain. And to put that in its proper perspective, this was my life for 1.5 years. I would wake up from a drug-induced sleep. I would reach on my nightstand and I'd grab a tablet of morphine and I would take that. I also had liquid morphine that I would take, fill up the dropper and drop it on my tongue to break through so that the other pill just could work. And I would wait for the pain to subside enough that I could actually physically get out of bed. This morning it was different. I didn't have any pain. I still took all of the medication and did my routine. And that day passed, and another day I woke up. The next day, no pain. The next day, no pain. The next day, no pain. Then I'm starting believing. I'm like, Jesus Christ did something to me. What is going on? This is so weird. I don't have any pain. And I start believing, and I'm like going, I don't even need this medication anymore. And so I get off the morphine. I got off 300 milligrams of morphine in 2.5 weeks. I mean, the pain management physician, I had a pain management physician, and all he did was prescribe terminally ill patients medication to get them through until they were dead. And so I drove up to Fountain Valley to see him, and I waited in the waiting room, and he came in the door finally, and he looks at me and he goes, "You really look good, Greg. I thought that you would just like be sweating like crazy and shaking, typical withdrawal symptoms." And I said, "Well, I feel great, Doc." He goes, "Well, tell me what's going on with you." And I said, "Well, Doc, this is going to kind of sound kind of weird." And he looks at me like, "Okay, now you've really gone off the deep end." He's like, started backing away. It's like, "Dude, this might be contagious. I need to get back." And he goes, "Well, it's not that, Greg. It's not a miracle. It's some kind of anomaly, some kind of mind over matter game that you're playing." And I just looked at him and I said, "Look, Doc, you know me. You've been treating me a year and a half. You got 2 file drawers on my condition. You know that chronic pancreatitis at my stage, when it's pronounced terminal, is irreversible, that it's not transplantable, that after a while you can't eat any longer, and that it requires massive doses of pain medication just to get by each day. So how do you explain that I don't have any pain anymore, that I quit taking your medication, and that I'm eating again? How do you explain that, Doc?" And he just looks at me kind of like a deer in the headlights. And he goes, "I guess you're right. It must be a miracle." The process to forgive myself was really difficult, because it's one thing to ask for forgiveness from God and from others, and that's hard. But to forgive myself, it's constantly reading the Bible, where it says, "My sins are as far as the east to the west," and that my sins are cast into the bottom of the sea, that they are forgotten by God. And I can't beat myself up on it, because if I'm constantly beating myself up on it, that's like nailing Jesus back to the cross. I don't run my life out of guilt. I do it totally out of love, out of gratefulness and thankfulness that I have been forgiven. Reconciliation is a tough road to hoe when you've gone through so much wreckage of the past. But all things are possible with God.